Operation Dawn Rescue. Chapter 1, Initial Setup. In the dimly lit war room, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The faint hum of electronic equipment and the soft rustle of paper created an underlying tension that mirrored the gravity of the situation. Captain Ariel Levin, a seasoned commander of the Israeli Special Forces, sat across from Lieutenant Colonel Miriam Cohen of Shin Bet, Israel's Internal Security Service. Between them lay a large table, cluttered with the latest intelligence reports, satellite images, and maps, each marked with significant locations and annotations. "We have reliable intel that Dr. Noah Shalev and Shmuel Katz are held in Nuzirat," Cohen said, pointing to a cluster of buildings on the map. Her finger hovered over a densely populated area, the maze of streets and alleyways underscoring the complexity of the mission ahead. "They've been moved multiple times, but our sources confirm their presence here." Ariel nodded, his mind racing through the scenarios they'd rehearsed over the past 3 months. The operation, codenamed Dawn Rescue, had been meticulously planned, with every detail scrutinized to ensure the highest chance of success. The stakes were immense. Rescuing the hostages would not only save lives, but also send a powerful message. Operational intelligence from the last 24 hours suggests an increase in guard presence around these buildings, Cohen continued, tapping the map for emphasis. "We suspect Hamas has received some indication of our interest in this area, though they likely don't know the specifics." Ariel leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving the map. "We need to move swiftly and decisively. Any delay could cost lives." His voice was calm but carried an edge of urgency. "Our disguises as Palestinian militants must be flawless. We'll blend in, move at dawn, and extract the hostages before anyone knows we're there." Cohen nodded in agreement. "Our diversion tactics will be crucial. The IDF will launch operations in Burich and Deir al-Balah to draw their attention away. It's a delicate balancing of force to distract, but not so much that we provoke a massive retaliation." Ariel's thoughts drifted to his team. Each member was chosen for their expertise and resilience. They had trained relentlessly, simulating every possible scenario. They were ready, but the unpredictability of real combat always loomed. "We've accounted for every variable we can," Cohen reassured him, sensing his thoughts. "Now we trust our training and instincts." "Indeed," Ariel replied. He picked up a photograph of Dr. Noah Shalev, a dedicated humanitarian worker who had been providing medical aid in Gaza before her capture. Beside her was Shmuel Katz, a young journalist whose reports had shed light on the region's complexities. Their faces, now symbols of hope and desperation, fueled his resolve. "We go in 2 days," Ariel said, setting the photograph down. "I want final preparations completed by tomorrow evening. Every piece of equipment, every detail must be double-checked." "Understood," Cohen replied, her voice steady. "I'll have the latest intelligence brief ready by morning. We'll need to go over it once more with the team." As Ariel stood to leave, he glanced around the war room. The walls were adorned with maps and screens displaying live feeds from various sources. This room had seen countless operations, each critical in its own right, but Dawn Rescue felt different. The personal stakes, the potential for political ramifications, and the sheer audacity of the mission set it apart. "Get some rest, Miriam," he said, turning to Cohen. "We'll need our wits about us." "You too, Ariel," she replied. "Tomorrow's another long day." As Ariel left the war room, he couldn't shake the weight of responsibility. Each step he took echoed the silent promise he made to himself and his team to bring everyone home safely. The next 48 hours would test their limits, but he was ready to face the challenge head-on. Chapter 2, Preparations. Disguises. The morning sun cast a harsh, white light over the secure underground facility where the Israeli Special Forces team was preparing. The air was thick with focus and tension, every soldier engrossed in their tasks. Tables were strewn with gear firearms, tactical vests, maps, and most importantly, the disguises they would wear to infiltrate Nuseirat. Captain Ariel Levin stood in front of his team, observing as each member meticulously prepared. Their disguises were critical. Any mistake could blow their cover and endanger the entire mission. The team was dressing as Palestinian militants, a painstaking process that involved not just clothing, but mannerisms, language, and even the local slang. Lieutenant Eitan Rivlin, the second-in-command known for his technical skills and bravery, adjusted his keffiyeh in the mirror. "Every detail counts," he murmured, his voice steady but serious. "From the way we walk to the way we speak. We can't afford any slip-ups." Nearby, Sergeant Yael Ben David helped another soldier adjust his disguise. "Remember, keep your heads down and avoid eye contact. Blend in as much as possible." Ariel nodded, satisfied with their progress. "All right, everyone gather around," he called out. The team formed a semicircle, their attention laser-focused on their leader. "Today, we finalize our preparations. You all know the stakes. We're going into one of the most densely populated and hostile areas in Gaza. Our disguises need to be perfect, our actions precise," Ariel said, his voice calm but authoritative. The team nodded, their expressions a mix of determination and resolve. They knew what was at stake, not just the lives of Dr. Noah Shalev and Shmuel Katz, but also their own. "Let's run through our roles one more time," Ariel continued. "Yael, you're our lead on communications. Make sure our channels are secure and undetectable. Eitan, you'll handle the technical breaches. We need quick access to those buildings without raising alarms." They went through each detail, rehearsing their parts in the mission with military precision. Every scenario, every possible complication, was considered and planned for. The tension in the room was palpable, but so was the confidence. They had trained for this, and they were ready. Final briefing. As the final preparations were underway, Lieutenant Colonel Miriam Cohen entered the room, carrying a stack of updated intelligence reports. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. Ariel gave her a nod, stepping back to allow her to take the lead. Cohen placed the reports on the table and looked around at the assembled team. "This is it. Our final briefing before we move out tomorrow. I want to emphasize the importance of precision and coordination. Any mistake could cost lives, including your own." She pointed to the map on the wall, highlighting the buildings where the hostages were believed to be held. "These are our primary targets. Building A houses Dr. Shalev, and Building B is where Katz and the others are located. We have to hit both simultaneously to prevent any chance of the hostages being moved or harmed." Cohen's eyes met each soldier's, ensuring they understood the gravity of her words. "Our diversionary tactics will commence at 0400 hours in Burij and Deir al-Bala. This should draw enough attention away from Nuseirat, but we need to be swift. We have a narrow window to execute this operation." She then turned to Ariel. "Captain Levin will lead the team into Building A, while Lieutenant Rivlin will head the operation on Building B. Both teams will need to maintain constant communication. Yael, make sure our frequencies are secure." Sergeant Ben David nodded, her expression serious. "Understood, ma'am." "Remember," Cohen continued, "our primary objective is to extract the hostages safely. Engage only if necessary. We cannot afford collateral damage." The eyes of the world will be on us once this operation is known. Ariel stepped forward, reinforcing Cohen's points. We've trained for this. We've anticipated every possible scenario. Stay focused, stay calm, and trust in your training. We succeed together, or not at all. The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Each soldier was acutely aware of the risks, but their determination was unwavering. Get some rest tonight, Cohen concluded. Tomorrow, we make history. As the team dispersed, Ariel lingered, his mind still racing through the plan. Cohen approached him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. They're ready, Ariel. And so are you. He nodded, taking a deep breath. Tomorrow, we bring them home. The war room slowly emptied, the soldiers moving with a quiet purpose. The final hours before the mission were always the hardest, a mix of anticipation and anxiety. But they were ready. Every detail had been accounted for, every scenario rehearsed. Now, all that remained was to execute the plan and hope that their meticulous preparations would lead to a successful rescue. The next chapter in their story would be written in the streets of Nuseirat, where courage and strategy would determine the outcome of Operation Dawn Rescue. Chapter 3: Strategic Moves. Diversion Tactics. The day before the operation was a flurry of activity. The Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, were tasked with launching diversionary tactics to mislead Hamas operatives and draw their attention away from Nuseirat. In the early morning hours, IDF units mobilized in eastern Burej and East Deir al-Balah, creating a series of controlled skirmishes and loud explosions designed to simulate an impending attack. From a command center deep within the secure facility, Captain Ariel Levin monitored these operations closely. Large screens displayed real-time satellite feeds and troop movements, providing a comprehensive overview of the unfolding diversions. Alpha Team, proceed to Sector 4. Ariel's voice was calm and measured as he spoke into the radio. Engage lightly and then fall back. We need them to believe we're preparing for a major offensive. The command center buzzed with activity. Technicians and intelligence officers tracked every movement, adjusting plans based on real-time data. Ariel's eyes were fixed on the screens, analyzing the effectiveness of their tactics. The goal was to create enough noise and confusion to divert Hamas forces without provoking a full-scale confrontation. Captain, the diversion teams are reporting increased activity in Deir al-Balah. It looks like Hamas is taking the bait, reported one of the intelligence officers. Good, Ariel replied. Keep the pressure on, but avoid direct engagement. We want to keep them occupied, not escalate the situation. As the hours passed, the diversionary tactics seemed to be working. Hamas forces were moving eastward, away from Nuseirat, exactly as planned. Ariel felt a slight easing of the tension that had gripped him for days, but he knew this was just the beginning. Stay sharp, everyone, he reminded his team. We need to maintain this deception until the very last moment. Simulation drills. With the diversions in full swing, it was time for the Special Forces team to conduct their final simulation drills. They gathered in a large, dimly lit warehouse that had been converted into a mock-up of the target buildings in Nuseirat. Every detail had been replicated, from the layout of the rooms to the placement of the guards. Lieutenant Eitan Rivlin stood before the assembled team, his expression serious. This is it. Our last chance to go through the plan before we execute it for real. Every movement, every decision must be precise. Let's get to work. The team split into two groups, each led by their respective commanders, Captain Levin for the raid on Building A and Lieutenant Rivlin for Building B. They moved through the mock buildings with military precision, practicing every step of the operation. Go, go, go! Levin shouted as his team breached the door, moving swiftly and silently through the corridors. They neutralized the mock guards and secured the designated rooms, where stand-ins for the hostages were held. In the adjacent building, Rivlin's team encountered simulated resistance. Blank gunfire echoed through the warehouse as they practiced handling the fierce opposition they anticipated. Rivlin's calm, authoritative voice guided his team through the drill, ensuring that each member knew their role and executed it flawlessly. Cover the exits. Secure the hostages. Rivlin ordered, his team moving like a well-oiled machine. The drills continued for hours, each scenario growing more complex. They practiced everything from stealthy infiltrations to full-scale assaults, ensuring they were prepared for any eventuality. The tension was palpable, but so was the focus. Every soldier knew the importance of these final preparations. By the end of the day, the team was exhausted but ready. They had drilled every possible scenario, refined their tactics, and solidified their coordination. The simulations had revealed potential weak points, which were quickly addressed and corrected. Captain Levin gathered the team for a final debriefing. "You've all performed exceptionally well. Tomorrow, we execute the plan. Trust in your training and in each other. We're ready." The room fell silent, each soldier reflecting on the gravity of the mission ahead. They knew the risks, but their resolve was unshakable. The culmination of months of planning and preparation would soon be put to the ultimate test. As the soldiers dispersed, Ariel and Rivlin exchanged a glance, a mutual understanding passing between them. They were ready to lead their team into Nuzirat and bring Dr. Shalev and Shmuel Katz home. The final hours of preparation had solidified their confidence, and now, all that remained was to wait for dawn and the operation that would define their careers and possibly their lives. Chapter 4: Emotional Preparation. Personal Moments. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the secure facility, the atmosphere inside shifted from intense preparation to a quieter, more reflective mood. The soldiers, having spent the day rehearsing their roles and perfecting their tactics, now found themselves in the lull before the storm. It was a time to gather their thoughts, to connect with the reasons they fought, and to find strength in their personal lives. Captain Ariel Levin sat on a metal bench in a small, dimly lit room adjacent to the main command center. In his hands, he held a letter, the edges worn from frequent handling. It was from his daughter, Leah, a bright and spirited teenager who was the light of his life. As he unfolded the paper, he could almost hear her voice, the words bringing her presence into the room. "Dear Dad," the letter began, "I miss you so much. I know you're doing something really important, and I'm proud of you. Mom says you're a hero, but to me, you're just my dad. I can't wait for you to come home and take me to the beach like you promised. Stay safe. I love you." Ariel smiled softly, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and longing. Leah's words reminded him of why he did what he did, the personal sacrifices he made for the greater good. He folded the letter carefully and placed it back in his pocket, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. In another part of the facility, Lieutenant Eitan Rivlin leaned against a wall, his phone pressed to his ear. His wife, Yael, was on the other end, her voice a soothing balm to his frayed nerves. "I know this mission is dangerous, Eitan," Yael said, her tone steady but tinged with concern. "But I believe in you. You've always been so brave and strong. Just promise me you'll come back to us." Eitan closed his eyes, letting her words wash over him. "I promise, Yael. I'll come back to you and the kids. You keep me grounded, remind me of what's important. They talked for a few more minutes, sharing small details of their lives, the mundane and the meaningful. It was a precious connection, a reminder of the life waiting for him beyond the mission. When he finally hung up, Eitan felt a profound sense of calm and determination. His family was his anchor, and their love gave him the strength to face the dangers ahead. Elsewhere, Sergeant Yael Ben David sat with a photograph in her hands. It was a picture of her and her younger brother, taken during a hiking trip in the Negev desert. He had followed her into the military, inspired by her dedication and courage. Now, he was stationed in a different unit, facing his own challenges. She traced the edges of the photo with her finger, drawing strength from their shared bond. The soldiers were not just warriors, they were fathers, mothers, siblings, and friends. These personal moments, these glimpses into their lives outside the battlefield, humanized them and raised the stakes. They were not just fighting for a mission, but for the people they loved and the lives they hoped to return to. Evening reflections. As the evening wore on, the facility grew quieter. Some soldiers wrote letters, others read books or listened to music. Each found their own way to cope with the impending operation, to draw strength and solace from their personal connections. Captain Levin gathered his team one last time before they retired for the night. Tomorrow, we embark on a mission that will test our limits. Remember why we're here. Remember who we're fighting for. We're not just soldiers, we're fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters. We fight for each other and for the people we love. The team nodded, their faces a mix of determination and reflection. They had trained hard, prepared meticulously, and now they drew strength from their personal connections. The weight of their mission was heavy, but they carried it with a resolve forged by love and duty. As they dispersed, heading to their bunks for a few hours of restless sleep, the air was thick with anticipation and resolve. The next day would test their mettle, but they were ready. They had prepared physically, mentally, and emotionally. Now, all that remained was to execute the plan and bring Dr. Noah Shalev and Shmuel Katz home. The quiet moments of personal reflection had given them a renewed sense of purpose. As dawn approached, each soldier knew they were part of something bigger than themselves, bound by duty and strengthened by love. The emotional preparation had fortified their spirits, readying them for the challenges ahead. Chapter 5: The Raid Begins. Infiltration. At precisely 11 a.m., the operation commenced. The sun was high in the sky, casting stark shadows on the narrow streets of Nuziret. The air was thick with the hum of daily life, but beneath this surface calm, tension simmered. Disguised as Palestinian militants, the Israeli Special Forces team moved into position, their every movement calculated and deliberate. Captain Ariel Levin led his team through the bustling streets, their disguises meticulously crafted to blend in with the local populace. They wore traditional clothing, keffiyehs wrapped around their heads, and carried AK-47s slung over their shoulders. Each soldier moved with practiced ease, mimicking the mannerisms and gait of the local militants. Ariel's heart pounded in his chest, but his exterior remained calm and focused. His eyes constantly scanned the surroundings, alert to any sign of danger. He communicated with subtle hand signals, directing his team to take up strategic positions around Building A, where Dr. Noah Shalev was believed to be held. Lieutenant Eitan Rivlin led the second team towards Building B, using the same level of precision and care. They navigated through narrow alleyways, avoiding the main thoroughfares where they might draw unwanted attention. The plan was to strike simultaneously, minimizing the chance of the hostages being moved or harmed. The team reached their designated positions without incident. Ariel checked his watch. It was almost time. He took a deep breath, the weight of the mission heavy on his shoulders. Every second counted, and they needed to execute the plan flawlessly. Simultaneous raids. At exactly 11:15 a.m., the signal was given. Ariel's team moved swiftly and silently towards the entrance of Building A. They positioned themselves on either side of the door, ready to breach. Ariel nodded to his point man, who placed a small charge on the lock. With a muffled thud, the door swung open, and the team flowed into the building like a well-rehearsed dance. Inside, the air was thick with tension. The team moved with precision, clearing each room methodically. Ariel led the way, his senses heightened, every nerve on edge. They encountered 2 guards in the hallway, neutralizing them quickly and silently. As they approached the room where Dr. Shalev was believed to be held, Ariel signaled for the team to halt. He pressed his ear against the door, listening for any sounds inside. Hearing nothing, he nodded to his men. The door was breached, and they stormed inside. Dr. Noah Shalev was there, her eyes wide with shock and relief as she saw the soldiers. Ariel moved to her side, reassuring her. "We're here to get you out," he whispered. "Stay close and do exactly as we say." Meanwhile, across the street, Lieutenant Rivlin's team was executing their part of the plan with equal precision. They breached the entrance to Building B, moving swiftly through the corridors. Resistance was fiercer here. They encountered several guards who put up a fight. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the narrow hallways. Rivlin's team pressed forward, undeterred by the resistance. They reached the room where Shmuel Katz and the other hostages were held. Rivlin himself led the charge, bursting through the door. A brief, intense firefight ensued. Rivlin's bravery shone through as he took down multiple guards, ensuring the safety of the hostages. "You're safe now," Rivlin told Katz, helping him to his feet. "Stay low and follow us." The teams had rehearsed these movements countless times, but the reality of the situation brought a new level of intensity. Every second was crucial. Ariel's team moved quickly to extract Dr. Shalev, while Rivlin's team escorted Katz and the other hostages out of Building B. As they regrouped outside, the situation remained perilous. They needed to move the hostages to the extraction point without attracting too much attention. Ariel signaled to his team to blend into the crowd, using the confusion to their advantage. "Stay close," Ariel instructed Dr. Shalev, who nodded, her face pale but determined. Rivlin did the same with Katz and the other hostages, maintaining a tight formation as they navigated through the streets. The tension was palpable, every step bringing them closer to safety but also deeper into potential danger. The success of the operation hinged on their ability to remain undetected during this critical phase. As they neared the extraction point, the tension reached a fever pitch. They had come this far, but the mission was far from over. Ariel and Rivlin exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of the stakes. They had trained for this, prepared for every contingency, and now they were in the final stretch. With the extraction point in sight, they moved with renewed urgency, every sense on high alert. The raid had begun, but the true test of their skills and resolve was just beginning. Chapter 6: Hostage Rescue. Dr. Noah's Rescue. The moment the door swung open, Captain Ariel Levin's team moved with the precision of a finely tuned machine. They flowed into the building, each soldier taking up their predetermined positions, weapons ready. The dimly lit corridors of Building A seemed to stretch endlessly, but they had rehearsed this layout dozens of times. Every turn, every room, had been committed to memory. Two guards stood in their path, their surprise lasting only a fraction of a second before they were swiftly and silently neutralized. Ariel signaled his team to advance. They moved deeper into the building, methodically clearing each room. As they approached the room where Dr. Noah Shalev was believed to be held, Ariel motioned for the team to halt. He placed a small camera under the door, the live feed confirming her presence inside. With a nod to his point man, they prepared to breach. The door exploded inward with a muffled thud, and the team surged inside. Dr. Noah Shalev, disheveled but unharmed, looked up in shock. Ariel was the first to reach her, offering a reassuring hand. "Dr. Shalev, we're here to get you out," he said, his voice steady and calm. "Stay close to me and do exactly as we say." She nodded, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and relief. The team formed a protective circle around her as they moved swiftly back through the building, retracing their steps. The tension was palpable, every second a potential encounter with enemy forces. Outside, the chaos of the raid began to unfold, but Ariel's team remained focused. They had a clear path to the extraction point, and they moved with purpose, blending into the crowd and using the confusion to their advantage. Gun battle. Across the street, Lieutenant Eitan Rivlin's team faced a much fiercer challenge. The moment they breached Building B, they were met with heavy resistance. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the narrow hallways as they pushed forward. Rivlin led the charge, his determination unwavering. His team advanced methodically, returning fire and taking down enemy combatants with practiced efficiency. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and the sound of shouted orders. As they approached the room where Shmuel Katz and the other hostages were held, the resistance intensified. A fierce gunfight ensued, the narrow hallway becoming a deadly gauntlet. Rivlin moved with remarkable courage, his focus solely on reaching the hostages. "Push forward," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We have to reach them." In the midst of the battle, Chief Inspector Arnon Zmora took a critical hit, collapsing to the ground. Despite his injury, he continued to direct his team, his voice steady and authoritative. "Cover the left flank," he ordered, clutching his side. "We need to secure this hallway." Rivlin fought his way to Zmora's side, providing cover as his team advanced. Blood seeped through his uniform, but he refused to falter. His priority was the hostages, and he wouldn't let anything stand in their way. Finally, they reached the room. Rivlin and his team burst through the door, taking down the remaining guards in a flurry of gunfire. Shmuel Katz and the other hostages huddled in the corner, their faces pale with fear. "You're safe now," Rivlin said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Stay low and follow us." The extraction was a race against time. Rivlin's team moved quickly, guiding the hostages through the building. The firefight continued around them, but they pressed forward, determined to reach safety. Outside, Ariel's team was already at the extraction point, Dr. Shalev secured and waiting. The sound of gunfire signaled the approach of Rivlin's team, and Ariel's heart pounded as he scanned the crowd for any sign of them. When they finally emerged, the relief was palpable. Rivlin, bloodied but resolute, led the hostages to the extraction point. Chief Inspector Zmora, critically wounded, was supported by two soldiers, his face grim but determined. "We made it," Rivlin said, his voice a mix of exhaustion and triumph. Ariel nodded, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "Let's get them out of here." The teams formed a protective perimeter around the hostages as they moved to the extraction point. The vehicles were waiting, engines running, ready to whisk them away to safety. As they loaded the hostages into the vehicles, Ariel and Rivlin exchanged a look of mutual respect. They had faced immense challenges, but their training, courage, and determination had seen them through. The mission was far from over. They still needed to reach the makeshift helipad for the aerial evacuation, but they had taken a crucial step towards success. The hostages were safe, and their teams were intact. Now, they just needed to get everyone home. Chapter 7: Extraction Under Fire. Vehicle Ambush. The vehicles roared to life, engines growling as they sped through the narrow streets of Nuseirat. Captain Ariel Levin and Lieutenant Eitan Rivlin's teams were huddled inside, their focus now on the next critical phase, reaching the makeshift helipad for aerial evacuation. The hostages, Dr. Noah Shalev and Shmuel Katz, sat between the soldiers, their faces etched with tension and relief. Suddenly, the sharp crack of gunfire shattered the brief lull. Bullets pinged off the armored vehicles, and RPGs streaked through the air, exploding in deafening bursts. The convoy jerked to a halt as the lead vehicle was hit, flames and smoke billowing into the sky. Ambush! Ariel shouted, adrenaline surging through his veins. Everyone out! Secure the perimeter! The soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, exiting the vehicles and taking up defensive positions. The sound of gunfire was deafening, a cacophony of chaos as they returned fire. The hostages were pulled from the vehicles and shielded behind the remains of the convoy. Lieutenant Colonel Miriam Cohen's voice crackled over the radio. Hold your positions. Air support is on the way. Ariel glanced at Rivlin, who was already directing his team, his injuries seemingly forgotten in the heat of battle. The ambush had been brutal and unexpected, but they had trained for such scenarios. Every soldier knew their role. Rescue reinforcements. The situation was dire. The attackers were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. Ariel knew they couldn't hold out for long without support. The radio buzzed with frantic updates as Cohen coordinated the response from headquarters. Helicopters are inbound, she reported. ETA 2 minutes. Hold the line. The team tightened their formation, creating a protective circle around the hostages. Bullets and shrapnel flew through the air, the intensity of the firefight escalating. Ariel felt the familiar mix of fear and determination. They had come too far to fail now. Above the chaos, the thumping of helicopter blades grew louder. Israeli helicopters swooped in, engaging the attackers with pinpoint precision. The air was filled with the roar of engines and the sharp staccato of machine gun fire. The attackers faltered, their assault disrupted by the aerial support. Reinforcements arrived on the ground, additional IDF units pouring into the streets. They formed a protective corridor, their presence a much-needed boost to the beleaguered Special Forces team. The tide of battle began to turn. Move! Move! Ariel commanded, his voice cutting through the din. Get the hostages to the helipad. The team moved as one, guiding Dr. Shalev, Shmuel Katz, and the other hostages through the protective corridor. The helicopters provided cover, raining down suppressive fire on any remaining attackers. The journey to the helipad was a gauntlet, but the combined efforts of the ground and air units kept the enemy at bay. Chief Inspector Arnon Zmora, despite his critical injuries, continued to direct his men, his resolve unbroken. Rivlin, his own wounds bandaged hastily, helped carry Zmora as they moved towards the extraction point. The sight of the makeshift helipad, a clearing marked with flares, was a beacon of hope. The helicopters descended, their rotors kicking up dust and debris. Ariel and Rivlin's teams ushered the hostages aboard, ensuring everyone was secured. The gunfire continued, but the protective circle held firm, their training and determination paying off. As the last of the hostages were loaded, Ariel took a final look at the battlefield. They had faced immense odds, but their mission was nearly complete. He signaled to the pilots, and the helicopters lifted off, climbing rapidly into the sky. From the air, the scene below was a chaotic mix of smoke and movement. The ground forces continued to engage the attackers, ensuring the helicopter's safe departure. Lieutenant Colonel Cohen's voice came through the radio once more, this time filled with relief. Excellent work, everyone. We're bringing them home. Ariel allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. They had done it. Against all odds, they had rescued the hostages and were now heading to safety. The mission wasn't over, but the hardest part was behind them. As the helicopters soared towards the horizon, he thought of Leah's letter, of the promises made to loved ones, and of the bravery and sacrifice displayed by every member of his team. The extraction under fire had tested them all, but they had emerged victorious. Now, it was time to get the hostages and their heroes home. Chapter 8: Aerial Evacuation. Helicopter Evacuation. The helicopters ascended rapidly, the ground below becoming a chaotic blur of movement and sound. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was tense but focused. The Special Forces team remained vigilant, their eyes scanning the skies for any sign of danger. The hostages, Dr. Noah Shalev and Shmuel Katz, sat huddled between the soldiers, their expressions a mix of relief and exhaustion. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. "We're not out of the woods yet. Stay sharp. We've got reports of anti-aircraft positions in the area." Lieutenant Eitan Rivlin, despite his injuries, remained alert. He glanced at Chief Inspector Arnon Zmora, who lay on a stretcher, his condition critical but stable. The flight medic worked diligently to keep him stabilized, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. A sudden jolt shook the helicopter, the pilot's voice rising in alarm. "Missile lock. Brace for evasive maneuvers." The helicopter banked sharply, the passengers gripping their seats as the aircraft swayed and lurched. Outside, the thump of rotor blades was joined by the distant whine of incoming missiles. The pilot executed a series of rapid evasive maneuvers, each one designed to throw off the missile's tracking system. "Incoming," someone shouted, the tension in the cabin palpable. A flash of light and an explosion filled the sky as one of the missiles was intercepted by the helicopter's countermeasures. The crew breathed a collective sigh of relief, but the danger was far from over. Another missile streaked towards them, the pilot jinking the helicopter violently to evade it. "Deploy flares," the co-pilot commanded, and a stream of bright flares shot out from the helicopter, confusing the missile's guidance system. The projectile veered off course, exploding harmlessly in the distance. In the second helicopter, Captain Ariel Levin kept a watchful eye on the surroundings. He knew their window for escape was narrow. The anti-aircraft fire was intense, but their pilots were skilled, executing evasive maneuvers with precision. "Status on Noah?" Ariel called out to the medic. "Stable for now," the medic replied, her hands busy tending to Dr. Shalev. "We need to get her to a hospital as soon as possible." Ariel nodded, his eyes flicking to the horizon. "We'll get there. Just hang on." The helicopters pushed through the barrage, the pilot's skill and the countermeasures keeping them in the air. Despite the harrowing conditions, they maintained their course, each second bringing them closer to safety. The first helicopter, carrying Dr. Shalev, Rivlin, and Zmora, began its descent towards the designated landing zone. The rotors kicked up a cloud of dust and debris as they touched down. Ground crews rushed forward, securing the area and assisting with the evacuation. "Noah first," Ariel ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. The medics moved quickly, carefully lifting Dr. Shalev onto a stretcher and rushing her towards a waiting ambulance. Rivlin followed, his steps unsteady but determined. Zmora was next, the severity of his injuries necessitating immediate medical attention. "You're going to be okay," Rivlin said, squeezing Zmora's hand briefly before the medics took over. As the helicopters lifted off again, Ariel glanced back at the scene below. The evacuation was proceeding smoothly, but the threat of anti-aircraft fire remained. The second helicopter, carrying Katz and additional troops, followed suit, landing and offloading its passengers with the same urgency. The final ascent was tense, every eye watching for any sign of a threat. The helicopters climbed higher, the city below receding into the distance. The pilots maintained their vigilance, navigating the safest route to avoid further encounters with enemy fire. When they finally broke through the immediate danger zone, a collective breath was released inside the cabins. The worst was behind them, and the realization brought a wave of relief. Ariel turned to his team, his voice filled with gratitude and pride. "We did it. We got them out." The soldiers exchanged weary but triumphant smiles. They had faced immense odds and emerged victorious. Now, their focus shifted to ensuring the safe arrival of the hostages and the wounded at Tel Has-Homer Hospital. As the helicopters flew towards the horizon, the team knew their mission was a success. The hostages were safe, and their courage and determination had prevailed. The journey had been fraught with peril, but they had stood their ground, fought valiantly, and brought their people home. Chapter 9: Final Confrontation. Last Stand. The helicopters carrying the hostages and the wounded troops had lifted off, but Captain Ariel Levin and a small contingent of his team remained on the ground. Their mission was to ensure the safe evacuation of the hostages, and now they were the last line of defense against a wave of desperate attackers. As the sound of the departing helicopters faded into the distance, a tense silence settled over the makeshift helipad. Ariel's team, now reduced to a skeleton crew, took up defensive positions, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. The sense of impending danger hung heavy in the air. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the distant roar of engines and the clatter of gunfire. A final wave of Hamas fighters, intent on reclaiming their lost captives and avenging their fallen comrades, surged towards the helipad. The intensity of the battle that followed would test the mettle of every soldier present. Ariel barked orders, his voice steady and authoritative. "Hold the line. We can't let them reach the helipad." The attackers advanced with a ferocity born of desperation. Bullets whizzed through the air, and the ground shook with the impact of RPGs and grenades. Ariel's team responded with disciplined, precise fire, their training and experience guiding their every move. Sergeant Yael Ben David, a sharpshooter with a keen eye, picked off targets with deadly accuracy from her vantage point. "Got one," she called out, her rifle cracking with each shot. "They're pushing left." Ariel adjusted his position, coordinating the defense. "Cover the left flank. Eitan, take 2 men and reinforce that position." Lieutenant Eitan Rivlin, despite the pain from his injuries, moved with determination. He led his small squad to the left flank, where the attackers were attempting to break through. The firefight was intense, the air filled with the deafening roar of gunfire and explosions. Rivlin took a hit to his arm, gritting his teeth against the pain. He continued to fire, refusing to give ground. "Keep pushing. We can't let them through." The attackers were relentless, their numbers seeming to grow with each passing moment. Ariel's team fought with unmatched bravery, their determination unwavering. Each soldier knew the stakes. They were the last barrier between the enemy and the escaping helicopters. As the battle raged on, the enemy's resolve began to falter. The precision and coordination of Ariel's team took a toll on the attackers, their advance slowing under the withering fire. The ground was littered with debris and the fallen, the intensity of the conflict evident in every shattered window and scarred wall. In the midst of the chaos, Ariel spotted a group of attackers attempting to flank their position. "On me," he shouted, rallying a few nearby soldiers. They moved swiftly, intercepting the flanking maneuver with a fierce counterattack. Hand-to-hand combat ensued, the close-quarters fight brutal and unforgiving. Ariel fought with a ferocity driven by duty and survival, his movements precise and lethal. The enemy fighters, unprepared for the resolve of their opponents, began to fall back. The tide of the battle turned in favor of Ariel's team. The remaining attackers, realizing their efforts were futile, began to retreat. The air was thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the moans of the wounded, but the immediate threat had been repelled. Ariel took a moment to catch his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked around at his team, their faces smeared with sweat and grime, but their eyes shining with determination. They had held the line, protected the evacuation, and secured the mission's success. "Good work, everyone," Ariel said, his voice carrying a mixture of exhaustion and pride. "We held them off." The surviving soldiers regrouped, tending to their wounded and checking their equipment. The battle had been fierce, but their bravery and determination had prevailed. The last stand had underscored the resilience and courage of Ariel's team, their actions a testament to their training and spirit. As the sound of approaching IDF reinforcements reached their ears, Ariel knew they had done their duty. The hostages were safe, the mission accomplished, and his team had stood firm in the face of overwhelming odds. The final confrontation had tested them all, but they had emerged victorious. Now, it was time to regroup, recover, and honor the bravery and sacrifice of those who had fought alongside them. The mission was complete, but the memories of this battle would stay with them forever. Chapter 10: Safe Return. Arrival at Hospital. The helicopters descended towards Tel Has-Homer Hospital, their engines humming steadily as they prepared to land. Inside, the atmosphere was a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The mission had been a success, but the cost had been high. The hostages, Dr. Noah Shalev and Shmuel Katz, along with the injured troops, were finally safe. As the helicopters touched down, a team of medical personnel rushed forward, ready to provide immediate care. Stretchers were unloaded with swift precision, and the wounded were carefully transferred to the waiting ambulances. The air was filled with the sounds of urgent voices and the beeping of medical equipment. Lieutenant Eitan Rivlin, his arm hastily bandaged, helped to carry Chief Inspector Arnon Zmora, whose condition remained critical. The medics worked quickly, stabilizing Zmora as best they could before rushing him inside the hospital. Dr. Shalev, though shaken, insisted on walking. She clung to Captain Ariel Levin's arm, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You saved us." Ariel gave her a reassuring smile. "It was our duty, Dr. Shalev. We're just glad you're safe." Shmuel Katz, pale but unharmed, was led to a waiting area where his family anxiously awaited him. The moment they saw him, they rushed forward, embracing him tightly. Tears flowed freely as they were reunited, the relief and joy of his safe return evident on their faces. Inside the hospital, the injured soldiers were quickly assessed and treated. The medical staff moved with practiced efficiency, tending to wounds and administering necessary care. The soldiers, despite their injuries, bore their pain with quiet resilience, their minds still processing the events of the past hours. Heroes farewell. Later that evening, a somber ceremony was held in the hospital's courtyard. The sky had turned a deep shade of twilight, and the air was cool and still. Lieutenant Colonel Miriam Cohen and Captain Ariel Levin stood before a gathering of soldiers, medical staff, and the families of the hostages. The atmosphere was heavy with emotion, a mixture of grief and pride. Lieutenant Colonel Cohen stepped forward, her expression resolute but solemn. "Today, we stand together to honor the bravery and sacrifice of our soldiers," she began, her voice carrying through the hushed crowd. "They faced overwhelming odds and danger, yet they stood firm. They fought not just for the mission, but for the lives of Dr. Shalev, Mr. Katz, and their fellow soldiers." She paused, her eyes scanning the faces before her. "We owe a debt of gratitude to each and every one of them. To those who were wounded, we offer our deepest thanks for your courage and resilience. And to the families of those who did not return, we offer our most heartfelt condolences. Their sacrifice will never be forgotten." Captain Levin stepped forward, his gaze steady and filled with a quiet intensity. "I am incredibly proud of my team," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We trained for this moment, but nothing could truly prepare us for the reality of what we faced. Each soldier demonstrated exceptional bravery and dedication." He turned to look at the soldiers standing at attention. "To those who fought beside me, thank you. Your courage and determination were inspiring. And to those we lost, we honor your memory and your sacrifice. You gave everything to protect others, and we will carry your legacy forward." The crowd stood in silence, the weight of the words sinking in. The ceremony was a poignant reminder of the cost of their mission and the bravery of those who had participated. Ariel and Miriam laid a wreath at a makeshift memorial, a symbol of respect and remembrance for the fallen. As they stepped back, the soldiers saluted, their faces reflecting the deep sense of loss and pride that permeated the gathering. The families of the hostages approached, their gratitude palpable. Dr. Shalev and Shmuel Katz, their expressions filled with a mix of sorrow and relief, thanked the soldiers personally. Their words were simple but heartfelt, a testament to the impact of the soldiers' actions. The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence, the crowd standing together in a shared moment of reflection. The mission had been a success, but the journey had been arduous and costly. The bravery and sacrifice of the soldiers would be remembered and honored, their actions a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit. As the evening wore on, the soldiers and their families began to disperse, each carrying with them the memories of the day's events. The safe return of the hostages and the bravery of the soldiers would be a story told for years to come, a beacon of hope and courage in the face of adversity. Ariel and Miriam stood together, watching as the crowd slowly thinned. "We did it," Ariel said quietly, his voice tinged with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "Yes, we did," Miriam replied, her eyes reflecting the weight of their shared experiences. "And we will honor those who made it possible." They stood in silence for a moment longer, the cool night air a gentle reminder of the challenges they had faced and the lives they had saved. The mission was over, but the memories and the lessons learned would endure, a testament to the courage and sacrifice of those who had fought to bring their people home. Chapter 11: National Pride. Public broadcast. The sun had barely risen over Israel when the news broke. Every major news channel, radio station, and online platform was buzzing with the story of Operation Dawn Rescue. The nation had been on edge, waiting for updates, and now the details of the daring rescue mission were being shared with the world. In homes, cafes, and offices across the country, Israelis gathered around televisions and radios, their attention riveted on the broadcast. The Prime Minister stood at a podium, flanked by senior military officials and members of the rescued hostages' families. Behind them, a large screen displayed images from the operation helicopters lifting off, soldiers in action, and the hostages being reunited with their loved ones. "Today, we celebrate the courage and dedication of our brave soldiers," the Prime Minister began, his voice strong and resolute. Operation Dawn Rescue was a testament to the exceptional skill and unwavering resolve of the Israeli Defense Forces. These men and women risked everything to save innocent lives, and they succeeded against overwhelming odds. The broadcast cut to footage from the mission, showing the meticulous planning and the intense firefight during the final extraction. Viewers saw Captain Ariel Levin and Lieutenant Eitan Rivlin leading their teams, the determination and bravery etched on their faces. The nation watched as Dr. Noah Shalev and Shmuel Katz were safely evaluated, their expressions of relief and gratitude a powerful testament to the operation's success. As we celebrate this victory, we also mourn the loss of Chief Inspector Arnon Zmora, the Prime Minister continued, his tone somber. His bravery and sacrifice were instrumental in the success of this mission. He gave his life so that others might live, and we honor his memory today. The screen displayed a photograph of Chief Inspector Zmora, his stern but kind face a reminder of the personal cost of the mission. The Prime Minister paused, allowing a moment of silence to honor Zmora and the other soldiers who had been injured. Across the nation, tears were shed for Zmora and his family. His heroism had touched countless lives, and his loss was deeply felt. But amidst the sorrow, there was also a profound sense of pride. The Israeli military had demonstrated remarkable bravery and strategic ingenuity, and the nation was united in its admiration and gratitude. The broadcast continued with interviews from the rescued hostages and their families. Dr. Noah Shalev, her voice steady despite the emotion, spoke of her gratitude and the bravery of the soldiers who had saved her. "They risked everything for us," she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Their courage and determination are beyond words. They are true heroes." Shmuel Katz echoed her sentiments, describing the fear and uncertainty of captivity and the overwhelming relief of rescue. "I owe my life to those soldiers," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Their bravery is something I will never forget." The broadcast also featured clips of the tribute ceremony at Tel Has-Homer Hospital, where Lieutenant Colonel Miriam Cohen and Captain Ariel Levin had honored the fallen and wounded soldiers. The wreath-laying and the soldiers' salutes were powerful symbols of respect and remembrance, reinforcing the sense of unity and shared purpose. As the broadcast drew to a close, the Prime Minister's final words resonated deeply with the nation. "Today, we stand united, proud of our military and grateful for their sacrifice." Operation Dawn Rescue is a shining example of what we can achieve when we stand together, guided by courage and a commitment to protect the innocent. To our soldiers, we say thank you. Your bravery inspires us all. In homes across Israel, people felt a renewed sense of national pride. The story of Operation Dawn Rescue was more than just a military success. It was a testament to the strength and resilience of the Israeli people. The bravery of the soldiers, the sacrifices made, and the lives saved were a powerful reminder of the values that bound them together. As the broadcast ended, conversations buzzed with admiration and gratitude. The story of Operation Dawn Rescue would be told and retold, a symbol of hope and courage in the face of adversity. The nation had faced a great challenge and had emerged stronger, united by the heroism of its soldiers and the enduring spirit of its people. For Captain Ariel Levin, Lieutenant Eitan Rivlin, and their team, the mission had been a test of their training, their resolve, and their humanity. They had risen to the challenge, and their actions had inspired a nation. As they returned to their duties, they carried with them the pride of their country and the knowledge that they had made a difference.